Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Rocket Top Insider Diamond Pass podcast here on this Wednesday, May 28th edition. I'm your host, Jack Foster, coming at you alongside Ryan Schumpert, as always, previewing Tennessee Baseball's Knoxville Regional. The Vols get to host as the 14th overall seed. Not really a surprise given all the projections we saw after Tennessee's 2-1 run in Hoover, but alas, Tennessee gets to host, which may be a surprise given where kind of the Vols were at a couple of weeks ago, if you rewind that back that far. But a lot to get to today, Ryan. But before we get into it, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. No, it's a busy week as you expect this time of year, and excited to break down a regional and kind of take a look at what Tennessee's path is as they try to get back to Omaha for a third straight season.
2-seed Wake Forest from the ACC, 3-seed Cincinnati from the Big 12, and then 4-seed Miami of Ohio. Feels like a pretty easy regional, all things considered. I don't think Tennessee got a tough draw here.
Yeah, I think they got a favorable draw for sure. I think you would. I mean, just looking from the pure RPI standpoint, Wake Forest is 30th, Cincinnati's 33, so that would be very high for a 3-seed, but still nothing overly crazy. And just generally speaking, if it was, we talk about this all the time, it's not seeded like the NCAA basketball tournament, so there's a lot more luck, I guess you could say, on what your draw you get. But just in theory, if RPI was doing this seeding as the 14 overall seed, what Tennessee would have gotten trying to do some quick math, the 20th team in RPI would have been the next highest, I think, if that math's correct. May not be correct.
Well, if you go if you go 17 to, if you're doing that, like 17 to 16, 18 to 15, 19 to 14. So it would have been the 19th overall seed would be the 2 in the regional if you went lockstep like that.
Yeah, so just from that standpoint, shout out Jack helping me do some very basic math, but just from that standpoint, Tennessee got a good draw, I think. And I do think Miami of Ohio is like a quality 4 seed. I would probably say they're in the top half at the very least of 4 seeds, and in offense it's been good, but at the same time it's not Wright State, who was like 36 in RPI or something like that in 2021. And Tennessee is the 14 overall seed, so you don't expect to get like a super easy 4 seed like you would maybe hope if you're the number 1 overall seed. So I do think there's areas about each team that I think could present some issues for Tennessee, but generally speaking, I think it's a pretty favorable draw, and I think I've said it a couple times now. I think it's probably the easiest draw Tennessee has gotten in their now 4 times hosting under Tony Vitello, which is kind of crazy given they were the number 1 overall seed twice in those 4 times. And that doesn't mean Tennessee will go 3-0 and coast through this weekend, because I think this is the worst Tennessee team of those 4 teams that have hosted. But I definitely think you got to be pretty happy with the draw you got if you're Tennessee.
Who's the 2 seed last year? Remind me. I know Indiana was a 3.
Southern Miss.
Southern Miss. Yeah. Okay. Right. So that felt more difficult. 22, that regional was super tough. Campbell and Georgia Tech really good. And 21, you mentioned the Wright State thing. It just feels pretty gettable. And who would you say is the more dangerous team? Obviously not Miami of Ohio, but between Cincinnati and Georgia Tech, Cincinnati and Wake Forest, similar colors.
Yeah, similar type of schools too.
Different strengths, but Cincinnati obviously so good at stealing bases, which Tennessee is really bad at preventing. Do you think Cincinnati is the more dangerous team here, or would you still side with the 2 seed?
Yeah, look, I would side with the 2 seed in the sense that I think they're the better team. I think Wake Forest lineup is better than anything you could say about any other team. I think this is a really good lineup. I think they rank out on the numbers right in front of me, but like 6, I think, nationally and on base percentage, right around the top 10 in slugging as well. Yeah, 6 and on base percentage, 13th in slugging percentage. So it's a balanced offense, and they have 6 different guys that have hit double-digit home runs, so there's balance with that power in the lineup. Now, to this next point, I would just throw a caveat that Wake Forest is a really hitter-friendly ballpark too, but we've seen Lindsey Nelson Stadium in June. We know how hitter-friendly it can be when it gets hot and the ball just really carries. And I think having 6 different guys that have hit double-digit home runs this year is like a pretty good recipe to have a big offensive weekend. So I think from that standpoint, like I think Wake Forest is probably the most dangerous team. Their pitching staff's pretty bad after their first guy, though. So I could see if Tennessee was to get Wake Forest on Saturday night or even later in the weekend on Sunday or Monday, like I could see it being some really high-scoring games.
Good
I think
bullpen,
the
though, right?
What's that?
Good bullpen, though, right, for Wake?
Solid bullpen, yeah. They have like 3 to 4 bullpen arms that have been pretty reliable for them. But literally one starting pitcher. And it's been bad after the one starting pitcher. It's not like it's been shaky. But we're much worse than what Tegan Kuhns has been, to give Tennessee fans.
Then yeah, that's not great. Not great at all.
A look. I think the caveat to that would be Cincinnati's a terrible matchup for Marcus Phillips, who it seems like is going to pitch in Game 2. Tony Vitello didn't fully commit to that when he met with the media on Tuesday, but said that at that point, they didn't plan on really mixing things up. So I think that's an interesting dichotomy where you look at, like, if Tennessee gets past Miami of Ohio, who do you want to see in Game 2? I think Wake Forest is probably the more dangerous team, but Cincinnati, like, could be a really bad matchup for Marcus Phillips with the way they run the bases. And look, we talked about it going into the Arkansas start when we were discussing whether we thought Vitello might move Phillips from starting rotation. Was the point I made then. I think you've seen times this year when the Tennessee has not, as a team, has not responded well to a lot of runners stealing bases against Marcus Phillips, where I think it kind of deflated them. So I think you almost worry about it from that aspect. But long-winded answer to basically say I don't really know what my answer is. I kind of see the benefits to facing either one of them in Game 2 as opposed to the other.
Yeah, we'll continue talking about the opponents here before we get into strategy and just where Tennessee's at heading into the regional. Why Tennessee would roll with Marcus Phillips in this game. It just feels like it can't end well here. You got a guy's 37 to 38. I mean, hey, if Wake Forest wins, it's no big deal. Like, you avoid that in its entirety. But and I get what Tony's saying as far as routine and wanting to do, what you've done all year. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it from a Liam Doyle standpoint. But I don't know, man. Like, I just feel like this could really end badly if Tennessee faces Cincinnati on a Saturday and Marcus Phillips is the starting pitcher.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. Like, I wrote about it on Monday that I would start Liam Doyle in Game 2 and Marcus Phillips in Game 1. Miami of Ohio does not steal bases at all. It is a good lineup, but they are not aggressive on the base paths. This isn't necessarily the case, and obviously you had this with Liam Doyle, but you hope in a lot of ways Marcus Phillips and that upper 90s fastball would be something that Miami of Ohio didn't see a whole lot of in the MAC this season. That doesn't mean that their better hitters couldn't catch up to it and have success against it, but you do feel like that could be a little bit of a benefit. So yeah, I'm with you. And to me, it goes both ways. Like, sure, you look at it and you're like, Marcus Phillips is a really bad matchup for Cincinnati, but it's what I said about Wake Forest's offense. That's a really good offense. I'd feel a lot better for Tennessee's sake if you had Liam Doyle throwing against them. Like, Marcus Phillips throwing against Wake Forest, to me, and obviously, like, he shut down LSU. He shut down some really good offenses. It isn't to say he can't be better than this, but to me, that just feels like it has the making for like 4 2/3 innings, 3 runs, 2 earned runs. And not that outing would be bad by any means. Like, that wouldn't be a horrible outing. Like, you wouldn't be like, man, I can't believe they threw Marcus Phillips against Wake Forest. But it would just ask a good bit of your bullpen and kind of set you up to need to win a little bit more of a high scoring game. Whereas, and maybe you're getting greedy here, but you feel like you can play Marcus Phillips against Miami of Ohio, feel like he can maybe get you 6 or 7 innings. You throw Liam Doyle, any Liam Doyle outing, you feel like he's capable of giving you 6 to 8 innings. So it's definitely, there's a lot of boom for Tennessee, like boom ability for Tennessee if you go with Marcus Phillips Game 1 and Liam Doyle Game 2. And it feels like you're really taking that away by not mixing things up.
Yeah, I agree. I don't really get it, but Tony kept saying, you just got to focus on what's ahead of you. The first inning of Miami of Ohio is what's next. Of course, if you're going to want to throw your best punch in the first game that's ahead of you, you throw Liam Doyle. So it seems like that's what's going to happen. We'll see if that is officially what's going to happen, of course, here in a couple of days. I
Yeah.
think, though, if you're a Tennessee fan, you're rooting for Wake Forest on Friday because of avoiding the stolen bases thing with Cincinnati. And also, like you said earlier, Wake Forest has an ace, but other than that, or has a good starting pitcher, but other than that, it's not great. And if we were to hypothetically fast forward to a Saturday matchup between the Vols and Demon Deacons, could see a former Vol for
Yeah.
Wake Forest against Tennessee and Matthew Dallas. Remember him? Uh, Rewind a couple of years back. He was a really good recruit for Tennessee, big dude. Just was relegated to midweek opportunities, though, for Tennessee. Kind of struggled in his true freshman season. The transfers. Was a starter for Wake Forest to open the year, moved to a midweek role, but has come back and been better than he was early in the season because he struggled then. But it could happen to where Matthew Dallas starts against Tennessee on Saturday. Is that correct, Ryan?
Yeah, I don't think Wake Forest head coach has said anything specifically about that, but you just look at what Matthew Dallas's role has been, which you said it. He was the starter to start the season, Saturday starter to start the season, pitched the first 4 ACC games, and he was pretty brutal in those. 8 earned runs in 2 innings against Virginia Tech, got him bumped from the weekend rotation, and they didn't even use him as a bullpen guy in ACC play then. They kind of just relegated him to midweeks, to the point of Wake Forest struggling to find starting pitching. They circled back to him late in ACC play, so he came back twice, was once again the game 2 guy. I think that was a Saturday, and then last week in the regular season, I'm pretty sure they did it like the SEC, where it was a Thursday, Friday, Saturday series, so he threw on Friday. And, a little bit better than 4 earned runs and 3 1/3 against Pitt, and then 3 earned runs and 4 2/3 against Louisville. So a solid outing against Louisville, but it would match up. He's been the game 2 starter, so you would think he would throw in game 2. Obviously, they could make a change, but that's what they've been doing as of late. That was their plan going into the season. And certainly a guy that has struggled. And, I was going to say there's some familiarity both ways, and there is a little bit, but just enough turnover in Tennessee's lineup that I think from two sides having familiarity with each other's standpoint, it probably doesn't matter a whole lot. Hunter Inslee, Dalton Bargo, Reese Chapman, Cannon Peebles, like those guys have seen him, faced him a bunch in practice, I'm sure, but really not anybody else. At least unless I'm missing somebody in Tennessee's lineup that should know what Dallas's stuff looks like well.
Wait, was Matthew Dallas 2024?
Yeah.
Oh, crap. I thought it was 23. Man.
Yeah, 24.
Okay. So it was just last year.
Just last year, yeah.
Huh.
He entered the portal. He didn't make the travel squad in Omaha, and he entered the portal when we were in Omaha.
Yeah. Okay. That's right. Well, yeah. No,
And
good
to your
point.
point, like a guy we thought probably wasn't going to be a weekend starter, but like we definitely thought could help Tennessee's bullpen last year, and it certainly. I think he had maybe 1 or 2 outings early in SEC play that went really poorly, and it was just relegated to a midweek guy the rest of the year.
Right. Yeah. He did, and he has the look of a guy who, has high upside as a player. Like he looks
Yeah.
like he could be really, really good, and lefty too. But
6'5" lefty, long arms, lanky, kind of a traditional look for like a big time pitching prospect.
could throw pretty hard too, if I recall
Mm-hmm.
correctly. All right. Last thing here, just with Miami of Ohio. We touched on it a little bit, but pretty solid offense. But overall, I think you shouldn't have to worry too much with potentially getting upset. Game 1 of a regional here against a 4 seed, especially if Liam Doyle's pitching. Like I think if Liam Doyle's pitching, then you feel super confident. And this is a team that's not overly aggressive on the base path, doesn't play small ball or anything, which has obviously killed Tennessee at times this year. It feels more like a midweek matchup here, I think, on a game 1 of regional. Miami of Ohio is a solid team, but not something to lose sleep over. At least it doesn't seem.
Yeah, they do have a good lineup. Like I think they hover right around 50th nationally in a number of hitting stats. The top 7 guys, or maybe it's 6 guys, Trying to see if I have it written here. Does not look like I do. It's either top 6 or 7 guys in their lineup do all hit over 300. Kind of a black hole at the bottom of the lineup. They've kind of rotated starters in those last 2 spots, and not much offense production from those bottom 2 spots in the lineup. So
Gotcha.
I do think it is an offense that could score enough to keep the game interesting against Tennessee, but also not one that's super deep either.
There you have it. And Tennessee and Miami of Ohio will get underway. Was that 6 p.m. Eastern time
6
on
p.m. Eastern time.
Friday? As long as all
ESPN
things.
Plus.
Yep. And it's
Yeah.
noon. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's noon 6 on Saturday and Sunday, right?
Correct.
For the 2 games.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously ESPN Plus on. I have a couple notes. One on the broadcasting side. ESPN Plus on Friday, which is a bummer. I know for people. They haven't announced the Saturday and Sunday stuff, but it's also Mike Monaco and Kyle Peterson that are doing the games, which kind of tell me that that's probably going to be on TV the next 2 days. I would think so. I mean, that's one of ESPN's better broadcasting crews, so
Definitely.
I would think so. And then there was 2 other points I wanted to make, just circling back to the Liam Doyle deal. And I'm trying to get all my points out of the way now because I don't want to harp on it too much over the weekend or anything like that. I just kind of say my case before. To me, like where I would maybe most disagree with like the logic from Tony of like you just got to keep any of his being like you got to keep the next game the main thing and just focus one game at a time. I think sometimes that's the case if you have pitching depth where it's like a lot worse to lose the first game than to lose the second game. To me, they should be looking not as players but just as a coaching staff 2 games ahead, because it's going to be really hard to get out of the loser's bracket if you lose that second game. Doesn't mean they can't do it, but you're talking about having to win 3 straight games with a pitching staff that's depth has not been great this season. I really think it makes more sense to look 2 games ahead. And now you empty the tank there. I mean, people have asked me about like, do you want to see AJ Russell or Brandon Arbitson as the game 3 starter over Tegan Kuhns? And I'm kind of like, I have more trust in those guys than Tegan Kuhns right now. But you worry about that when you get there. I would empty the tank using Brandon Arbitson and AJ Russell the first 2 games to try to win those 2 games. So that's kind of how I look at it. Now, I will say, just in defense of Tennessee and Tony Vitello for like this decision, they're not the only ones that do this. Like LSU threw Paul Skeens in game 1 of a regional a couple years ago, and they didn't need to throw Paul Skeens in game 1. They did. People do this all the time. I'd say teams are very split on typically what they do, whether they like to throw their number 1 guy on Friday of a regional or save him for game 2. So while I disagree with it, while I think it really set the table to make a lot of sense to save Doyle for game 2, it's not like this is just some like completely foreign concept that Tennessee's just like behind the 8 ball on what teams do. Like a lot of teams approach it the same way Tennessee has, or Tennessee looks to be approaching it.
It just feels like the downside is so much higher. Like the other way around, I don't see how it can blow up in your face. But this way, it's like, hey, say you use Liam Doyle on Friday and then he's okay, and he gives you 6, and you use Tanner Franklin after him, and he goes to win. Okay, then on Saturday, Marcus Phillips allows 4 runs on 4 hits, something crazy like that, to where it's just, hey, someone gets on, put him at third, and then since he's able to play small ball and get their way to 4 runs in the first handful of innings, Marcus is bounced after just 3 1/3, 75 pitches. And then look, you got to ride Russell the entire game, and maybe he doesn't make it the entire game. And then who are you going to give it to in a closer spot? Then you got to use Arbitson or whatever. Like, you just can really get yourself in a hole. And then if you lose the game, you're really screwed. Like you said, I don't know. I feel like the downside is so much higher doing the Doyle Phillips than the Phillips Doyle. But alas, Tony Vitello knows infinitely more about baseball than I will ever know. So I'm not going to question him too much. But yeah, I just don't get it. But
I think the argument on the downside would be just losing the first game. Like, you have a better chance to lose the first game if you throw Marcus Phillips, and you're completely screwed if that's the case.
But if you can't beat Miami of Ohio with Phillips,
yeah, no, I agree. You don't deserve to win the regional, but you're saying the downside aspect of it. That's the downside.
I get that.
Yeah,
and I will say really stupid if that happens. But also, then it's
yes, you do.
Yeah.
You get killed
Yeah.
if that happens, essentially.
Right.
Um, and I think the hope for Tennessee is, I mean, you say 6 or 7 innings from Doyle. You hope to have a big lead on Friday and not have to use Snead or Russell or Arbitson. So then,
Right.
even if you only get 4 innings from Marcus Phillips, you can do what I said a minute ago, and you can empty the tank with your most trusted bullpen guys in that game too, and feel pretty good that you can. If it's Wake Forest, maybe win a little bit higher scoring game, or if it's Cincinnati, kind of shut down that lineup with your bullpen. So yeah, I think that's if they do go to way where Tony Vitello indicated that they would on Tuesday. I think that's where you kind of have to turn your attention to now, or at least that's where I turn my attention to, of like, how does Tennessee handle pitching from here? Can Tennessee build a big enough of a lead with Liam Doyle on the mound that they don't have to use that they can use Franklin and Loy and some other guys other than Snead, Russell, and Arbitson and on Friday night?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the hope. And I would not I would anticipate it actually being Franklin if Tennessee's up, a few runs. Tony's liked that stack when he can do it at times, so that would be what I would expect. Let's get into this though. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. I think it's a topic we need to address, and that's game 3, the potential of, Tennessee shifting its starting rotation if it should, what that would look like. Best case scenario for Tennessee is what we just said for Friday. A Doyle Franklin, assuming they start Doyle, only have to use 2 arms, maybe use Louis to face a batter or something, but don't have to burn Russell, Arvidsson, or Snead at all. And then on Saturday, the hope would be that Phillips gives you a solid 5 to 6 inning start. And then after that, they use one of those guys. I would anticipate it being AJ Russell, who has followed Phillips as of late. So if you can get through the second game using 2 arms, then holy cow, you're sitting very pretty. You've only had to use 4 arms basically through your first 2 games. Again, maybe you use one guy for just a couple of batters or something on Saturday too. That puts you in a Sunday spot where you have a full Snead, a full Arvidsson, and of course Tegan Kuhns, who has been starting in a game 3 role for the vast majority of the entire season. I don't think you start Snead. I don't think anybody's saying that. He's still a bullpen guy. But what Arbitson did against Texas, an absolute, gem of an outing, the best outing of his career. 85 pitches. He showed he can go long into the game. Sure, he kind of ran out of gas there in the 10th, but also, man, those 85 pitches are different than a 85 pitch start would be because everything was high leverage down the stretch in a razor thin game. And he got out of that 9th inning, and it was just absolutely electric how he did it with the strikeouts. And that getting amped up that much, I could have told you that going back out in the 10th, maybe the meter was significantly lower than it was because of how much he had to use there in the 9th. So a little bit different of an 85 pitch outing than you'd see in a traditional start. I think Brandon Arbitson would be the guy to start over Tegan Kuhns if Tennessee shifts the starting rotation. Do you think that should be something the Vols potentially do here if they're able to on a day 3?
I would lean towards no. And it's not that I don't. I mean, I think I said this earlier. I trust Brandon Arbitson or AJ Russell more than I trust Tegan Kuhns right now. I think you also saw Tegan Kuhns has been a little bit spotty the few times he has been in the bullpen, which isn't. I mean, isn't to say he can't be good out of the bullpen, but I would just kind of try to keep everything the same for him. Keep his routine similar, and bank on the familiarity. And it's the fact, like, we just saw it last week. We saw Brandon Arbitson have such an elite relief outing. So, sure, if things don't go well for Tegan Kuhns, if he only gets you through 2 innings, like, all right, sure, he's just the opener, and it's a Chris Stamos, AJ Causey thing. Like, Brandon Arbitson's the guy that you're asking to get more outs. So that's almost how I would look at it. I would probably still start Kuhns, but and certainly you're going to have, I think, more leeway for him than Chris Stamos had in the NCAA tournament last year,
Yeah.
in those starts. But I'm almost going into it thinking we're probably going to need Brandon Arbitson to get us more outs than Tegan Kuhns. That's kind of how I would be my outlook going in.
It's wild that one outing has just completely changed the outlook of a pitcher. Just one outing. I mean, really 2, I guess, because he was good in Arkansas. But come on, one outing has drastically changed the outlook of Brandon Arbitson, and I have no issue with that being the case. Like, usually I'm the guy who's like, "Hey, let's not get into this recency bias. Let's not put too much stock into one thing." But that was so special of an outing. It was so different than your normal great outing. Like it was a 10 out of 10 that I have no qualms with putting this much stock into Brandon Arvidsson right now. Do you have any check with yourself of putting so much trust into him after truly just one fantastic outing, whereas he had been inconsistent all year long?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have some check with myself of like, should I really be putting this much trust in him? But like when I still think it through, I'm like, no, that's where I land. And I will say part of it is, and you're right, 90% of it is this outing. But there were good outings ahead of it, which I think is what
Yes.
gives me a little bit of like you could see him building to this. In hindsight, I didn't
Mhm.
see Arvidsson doing what he did against Texas, and ahead of time, obviously not. I'm not trying to indicate that. But when you look back, you're like, well, there were a couple signs. He'd had three really good outings before that, and two of them were obviously shorter to just two
Yeah,
outs to get
that
out of an inning against
that
Arkansas.
that's more the thing about it all is the length of the outing. It's not
Yes.
necessarily him pitching well, it's how just the length of it. Over 5 innings and 85 pitches, like crazy.
Yeah. And I think the other one against Arkansas, like I think we all glossed over it because Tennessee was down in game 3, but he did get 5 outs and struck out 4 batters got 7 outs and strike out 4 batters while not allowing a base runner against Arkansas. So that one's one that was a little bit longer too. And he was dominant. It's just, again, Tennessee was down by whatever they were, 4 or 5 runs. So like you said, I mean, you made a great point about it. The Texas outing, it felt like every pitch he threw was really high leverage. None of the pitches really felt that high leverage against Arkansas.
No,
Uh,
no.
so yes, it's all been radically changed by what he did against Texas, and I think there is a little bit of pause because of just the recency of it. But the fact that he had had 3 outings before that, even though those 3 outings were shorter than his one outing against Texas, that makes me feel that there's a little bit more sustainability to it, and that it wasn't just purely a one-off.
We did some bullpen trust rankings last week on our podcast. I believe that was last week. And I believe it was AJ Russell won, which you nailed that because Russell ended up, showing that he could deliver an extended relief outing, and Hoover beyond 50 pitches was incredible against Alabama. I believe Loy was two, something like that. Maybe Sneed and Franklin. We didn't even rank Arbitson, which is crazy. I don't think. Krenzel was five. Now we have it published, on RockyTopInsider.com of Ryan doing some bullpen power ranking. Is a very interesting read, a very cool piece he did. And his bullpen power rankings are AJ Russell still one. Brandon Arbitson now two. We just talked about how his outlook has drastically changed. Nate Snead three. Dylan Loy four. Tanner Franklin five. Braden Krenzel six. Kind of walk us really through the back half of that and where you're at with Loy, Franklin, Krenzel moving forward.
Yeah, I think I didn't like tier them, but right now I have, and I kind of wrote this at the bottom: Russell, Arvidsson, and Snead. I trust. Those are
Mhm.
guys I trust. Then Loy and Franklin are a little bit shaky. Like, Loy has not been very good as of late. Obviously, we are Loy boys on this podcast. We will continue to be Loy boys. But in his last 7 outings, I think it is 7 outings. Yeah, 7 appearances, 9.62 ERA, strikeout walk rate's higher than a strikeout rate. So he just hasn't been great. I still feel solid about Loy if I need one out against the lefty. I still feel pretty good about him there.
Yeah.
Roll the dice, or maybe even 2 outs, something like that. Handing him a full inning, I feel a little bit more shaky right now. And look, maybe there's something to it. Of those 7 outings, he really had 3 really bad ones against Vanderbilt. And other than that, like, he was pretty solid in those other outings. Maybe not as good as he was earlier in the season, but you don't look at him and think they were terrible. So maybe there's something there. Maybe there's something that just Vanderbilt's had his number. And now playing against not Vanderbilt, he'll get back into a groove. Tanner Franklin, I think, is the most confusing guy in a lot of ways because you just look at some of the things that he's done this year for a reliever, you're like, yeah, that's what you want. He's got a good strikeout rate, a really low walk rate. He just hasn't missed many barrels. And he's kind of, again, in that Lloyd category of it could go either way. If I had to hand him an inning, I truly feel like it could go either way of whether he'd get the job done or not. And to that point, almost exactly, because the prompt I did, or like the requirement for the trust tree, was it's the ninth inning, you have a 1-run lead, you need 3 outs from a guy.
Yeah.
Who do you have the most trust in?
Yeah.
So then I went to look, because some of Franklin's worst outings this year has kind of been when Tennessee's asked him to do more. And that happened against Vanderbilt in the SEC tournament, where he was really solid for, I think, an inning and 2/3 maybe, or 2 innings. And then the last inning, it kind of fell through. He's had 12 outings this year where he's pitched against SEC opponents in 1 inning or less. He's given up a run exactly 6 of those 12 times. So it truly feels completely hit or miss. And then Braden Krenzel I had at the bottom as my last guy. Like, I just don't think he's been the same guy since he came back from illness. Yeah, I mean, he had 4 SEC outings before that, and his 4 before illness, 5 after the illness. The ERA is about the same, but that's kind of, he gave up 500 runs in 1 inning against Auburn before. So that he had 1 really bad outing before. Another 3 he was really good.
Yeah, A&M is terrible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was it though. Right.
Yes. Other than that, he pitched in those 4 outings, with one of those outings being 1 innings. He pitched 13 innings, strikeout rate nearly 30%, walk rate down at 8%. Pretty good. Stinston, 5 outings, only 6 innings pitched, strikeout rate down to 23%, walk rate all the way up to 23%.
That's the big thing. He's walked way too many guys lately. Yeah. That's what I was curious to hear.
Yeah, it's the walks that more than anything. It's kind of the opposite. Franklin, he doesn't walk guys, but he doesn't miss a lot of barrels.
Yeah.
Krenzel,
it's the zone.
Krenzel, he's, it's not like he's given up a ton of hard contact or anything. It mostly doesn't look terrible when you're watching it. And terrible would be too strong. It hasn't been terrible either. But it just hasn't been great. It doesn't feel like he's regained his form. So he'd be the guy that I'd have the least amount of trust in. Of these 6 pitchers, all pitched 10+ innings in SEC play. So that's kind of the barometer of, those are the 6 guys Tennessee's used a lot.
I would say since his sickness, the worst he's been as far as from a getting hit around standpoint would be Alabama and Hoover. Like, he come in and I'm like, Jesus, is this game going to end? Because Braden Krenzel just keeps giving up hits and runs. But other than that, like, yeah, the walks have been an issue, but it hasn't looked ugly for Krenzel, like you said, except for that Bama outing. But ultimately, you talk about late game spots, by the way. If Tennessee's up by like 8 on Miami of Ohio, if it's like 10-2 and Doyle's done, I'd throw Krenzel. Like, that's the guy I throw.
Krenzel or Breedlove. Those would be the 2 I'd throw.
Yeah, because
and I will say,
like the bottom of the
and I will say that the Krenzel's defense against Alabama came in with whatever, Tennessee up like 8 runs, and he's had walk issues. Just throw it in the strike zone. Yeah, it's okay if you get hit around. Like, he did what he should have done, and it's almost, I don't know if I want to say a good sign. It would have been a better sign if he just got the 3 outs quickly. But I'd much rather him come in and get hit around and give up some runs than a guy with walk problems coming in with a big lead and walking a bunch of people.
Yeah, completely fair. Just some final notes. A little bit of a shorter podcast today, but let's touch on the offense here. Tennessee struggled mightily against Vanderbilt. Texas had some ebbs and flows offensively throughout the game. Gavin Keelan, late game heroics. Against Alabama, it was the best offensive game of the season. 20 hits, that was a season high. An absolute onslaught from Tennessee's bats against Bama's pitching staff. Dalton Bargo had 2 homers. So it was a did Bargo homer twice that game? Am I remembering correctly? That was Arkansas, right? I'm dumb.
I think that was Arkansas.
Yeah.
He had 2 home runs against Arkansas. I'm not sure they were the same game.
He had a 2-homer game anyway, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
But
it was against Arkansas then.
Okay. Tennessee had an insane game against Arkansas. Cannon Peebles and Levi Clark were huge against Alabama, I should have said. The point is that Tennessee's offense had been building for 5 games straight. The Arkansas series had the most hits in a series all year long. Onslaught against Bama, solid against Texas, and faced some really good arms. Keelan does damage against the SEC Freshman of the Year late, but then against Vanderbilt, it's completely non-existent. Just a handful of hits, shut down by Cody Bowker early. So where are you at with this Tennessee offense? It felt like it had been so good for that stretch, truly turned a corner, but then we saw shades of what the offense had been pretty much all year long in SEC play, where it struggles a lot against some good pitchers. So where are you at with this offense heading into the regional?
I feel good about the offense. I liked it at least against right-handed pitchers. It feels like they've settled into roles. I like what the guys in the back of the lineup are giving them from a quality of at bat standpoint, and I still leave Hoover like feeling like a higher percentage of Tennessee's top of the order bats were clicking at once. Bargo would be the one guy who didn't have a great week overall. I thought you saw Dean Curley do some good things. Gavin Keelan was really good. Hunter Inslee bounced back from a bad series at Arkansas. Andrew Fisher was Andrew Fisher. So I like where this is at. I think, maybe I'll look dumb this. I don't think there's. I think the pitching will be easier this weekend in the regional than what Tennessee's seen.
Yeah.
They're playing it obviously a hitter-friendly ballpark. I expect a good weekend from Tennessee's offense, and I think Tennessee's offense very well needs to have a good weekend if they're going to win. I think there might be, especially if they get later in the weekend, they might have to outscore some opponents to win games. But I have confidence that Tennessee can do it.
Aside from A&M and Kentucky, which Kentucky was so bad, I think that was the worst Tennessee's offense been. It was historically bad that weekend. And Kentucky ends up being a bubble team. A&M, they just got jumped in a doubleheader. But Tennessee's schedule actually ended up being pretty tough. And when you look at the pitchers Tennessee faced down the stretch, the teams, hey, Vandy is the number one overall seed in the tournament. And Tennessee lost that series close, gets shut down in Hoover. But that was against the best team in the country. I mean, right now anyway. And then Auburn, Dutton's been a dude all year long, gets shut down by him in game one. You struggle in game 3 too, but Auburn, 4th overall seed in the tournament. So Tennessee actually kind of had a tough schedule down the stretch here with the teams they were playing. Even Ole Miss ends up being the 10th overall seed, and Tennessee won that series. But I think it's important to recognize that while the Vols struggled down the stretch a lot and often, that the teams they played, you throw in LSU too, they were really tough teams. Top half SEC teams, no question. Aside from the two I mentioned, Kentucky and A&M, going down the stretch there.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, just look at Tennessee's Final Four series at LSU, who's number 6 or 7, 6 overall seed. Home against Auburn, who's number 4. Home against Vanderbilt is number 1. And at Arkansas, who's number 3. So you're talking about they played 4 of the top 6 teams in the country in their Final Four series. And
crazy.
I think, and this is something we didn't talk much about, at least in a large part because Tennessee never won game 3. If they had won some of these game 3s, we probably would have talked about it some. I think you see now in hindsight, the importance. Tennessee never got swept. They never had this weekends where things truly, truly collapsed. They had a long stretch of not winning series, which in college baseball feels extremely frustrating and is a really big deal. But the fact that they never got swept, that's the reason that's one of the big reasons that they're a host, despite the fact that they won, just 4 SEC series. They found a way to sweep 2 of the SEC series they won, and they never got swept. And that's really important, and it is a big reason why they are at Lindsey Nelson Stadium this weekend and not somewhere else.
Last thing here, the NCAA and the selection committee, they love their storylines, don't they? If Tennessee wins the regional, assuming Arkansas can get out of its regional, it will set up for a Tennessee-Arkansas 14-3 super regional in Fayetteville. Tony Vitello versus Dave Van Horn, all the storylines coming too. And, we just saw this series just 2 weeks ago, not even in Fayetteville. And Tennessee, of course, lost 2 of 3, but it was very competitive. What'd you think, I guess, right, just as before we hop on out of here, of this? I think it made a lot of sense as we were watching, okay, yeah, they're going to go with the storyline here. It sucks that we just saw it. Don't really get to see anything new if, it ends up happening. But, hey, a Tennessee-Arkansas series, that's definitely going to get the juices flowing no matter what.
Yeah, no, I mean, you see it most years that they like to set up for potential storylines in the
Yep.
super regional. So it made a lot of sense. Yeah, I think it is annoying how late in the season that series was and how quickly they would be. Uh, but it's kind of what we said too. What the other potential, I mean, there were two other options, but the 4 seed was Auburn. Tennessee played them late in the year too, not quite as late, and the series was in Knoxville, so you'd have a little bit more different, but it was late in the year too. And then North Carolina was the one that I think probably would have been, if you wanted to avoid that, you could have done, but obviously North Carolina ended up falling, and I don't think Tennessee had a 12 seed resume, so, or a number 12 overall seed resume, so not shocking. Tough regional for Arkansas. I mean, Kansas was a regional host on the regional host bubble. Creighton's got, I think, at least a solid team. I don't think they're a great 4 seed, but not or a great 3 seed, but not a bad one either. So we'll see what happens. I would say here's a question for you: over or under 50% that Tennessee Arkansas is the super regional?
Wait, like, is it over a 50% chance that that's the super?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's under.
What?
I think it's under to both teams win.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
I
I mean, you would have to, if I'm doing the quick math accurately, you would have to say that there's a 75% chance or better that both teams win.
yeah. I yeah,
Yeah.
I would say that.
Yeah. I wouldn't quite go that far.
So, I mean, which side do you think is more apt to lose? Arkansas? Because they have a harder regional.
Yeah, I probably
They're a
would say
better
Arkansas.
team.
I'd probably say Arkansas. Uh,
Hmm.
but I think both, could lose. It wouldn't be shocking to me.
Yeah, maybe.
I'd have like maybe Tennessee 70%, Arkansas 65% chance of winning.
Wow, that's low, man. That's low. Okay. That's interesting. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, that would be 45.5% chance to both make it by those numbers.
Right.
But I mean, like, does 70% of the regional host win every year? I don't know what the numbers would be. Like, that feels around what it ends up being. Now, obviously, Arkansas is number 3, so you don't expect a higher seed to lose. But
Yeah, I just think as good of a team as Arkansas is, I have confidence in them. And then Tennessee, they're 9-0 in regionals under Tony at home.
yeah,
Like, I'm rolling with. I'm pretty confident Tennessee's going to win this regional. That's where I'm at. They got a really good draw. I'm not really scared of those teams all that much. We talk about Cincinnati stealing all these bags. They're not good at offensively. They don't have good numbers. So who's to say that if they even face Marcus Phillips, they struggle to even get on? Like if Phillips is not struggling with command, I don't know if it's going to be that big of an issue. Like we'll see, but
yeah, it could. I mean, it could be. And LSU doesn't run a ton, but it could be like LSU where he just doesn't allow that many base
yeah,
runners. So there's not that many opportunities for teams to run.
I feel fairly confident in Tennessee. I haven't looked into the Arkansas teams as much, but it's fun. That's Creighton. Like they want to go home.
Creighton and Nebraska are both in the tournament.
Yeah,
So hopefully one of them will at least make a run to supers where you have that storyline of trying to get back home.
yeah, yeah. Well, that'll do it for this edition of the Rock Top Insider Diamond Pass podcast. Be sure and follow along with all Rock Top Insider's Tennessee baseball coverage throughout the postseason at rocktopinsider.com. If you can watch like Friday night on E+, then follow along with the At Bat by At Bat live update threads every single game. rocktopinsider.com, super detailed thread, keeping you up to date there. You can, of course, follow RTI at Rock Top Insider on social media as well. If you want to follow Ryan, he's at rshump00. I'm at Jack Foster Media. We'll see you guys next time, and be sure and follow along Friday night as it is NCAA regional time in Knoxville. But for Ryan, I'm Jack. We'll see you next week.